ahead. So we have Faces by C.S. Lewis.
And this is Ann Fields and Jenna Minnelli and Megan Sproul.
We'll just do a summary of what we read to start.
We read through chapter 7.
Yes.
So
I guess it began with like an introduction of where we were, and specifically it's someone looking back on her life and writing down everything that happened, which was a way to get into the story, and it explained the context of the story a little bit and why the story was being written.
she started with the death of her mother and how that affected her life, and she went on to say about like how her father remarried and why, but she didn't like really get to know the new mother. And
Yeah, because her father always wanted a son,
Mhm.
which is typical of kings, and just wanting an heir. So his second wife that he took in bore him a daughter, but she ended up dying in childbirth. So they had the same process that they went through with the death of her actual mother, the narrator, where the girls shave their heads in some sort of mourning of a loss.
Mhm.
And so that daughter, the third daughter in the family now, is really where the story centers around.
the daughter's name is Psyche, and then the narrator's name is Orwell, and Redival is her sister.
Mm-hmm.
So
How do you guys feel about Psyche? Like, what are your feelings towards her? Because, like, I feel like she's kind of, in a way, innocent, because she hasn't done anything to deserve what, like, the punishment they're trying to force on her.
Mhm.
And they're trying to tie her to a tree and kill her, essentially, because
Why?
they're trying to sacrifice her to Unget, which is equivalent to Aphrodite in Greek mythology.
Yeah, and basically this whole book is written with Greek mythology in mind, but because they're not in Greece, they have different names for all of their gods and goddesses. And the whole entire reason why they want to make Psyche a sacrifice for Unget is because of the fact that people have started calling her a goddess because she's so beautiful, and there was like a famine and a big disease that they claimed if she touched people that they were healed, and so Unget, or Aphrodite, became really jealous, and so she wanted something to be done about it.
she's called the Accursed, and Unget is considered the Brute, or it could also be for Unget's son.
Mm-hmm. The Brute, or Unget's son, is
Yeah.
the monster of the mountain, which basically was sent to come kill what was ever tied to the tree. And so people have talked about it, and they're like kind of afraid of it, and there's like basically whispers, and like they call him the god of the mountain. But that's really where we left off, that basically Psyche was told that since she's the accursed, bad things are going to happen to the town if they did not sacrifice her, and so the king made the decision that, okay, we're going to give her away. And so the narrator, Oral, is basically begging with her father not to let this happen, but he lets it happen anyway.
I mean, Orwell is the narrator, and she definitely feels very attached to Psyche, who's the youngest daughter. I mean, Psyche is like a little sister.
Yeah, almost like her child,
Yeah.
because
Mhm.
she took her away from her nurse because she felt like the nurse wasn't doing a good job raising her, so she kind of raised her on her own. So there's kind of a mother-daughter attachment between the two of them.
She had help from Fox, who's
Mhm.
like the servant, kind of like the butler to them.
Teacher, because the king thought it was important when he did have a son, and it turned out he didn't have a son, but he thought it was important to raise his son educated and wanted the fox to practice on the girls. What do you guys think motivates Oral to protect Psyche? Do you think it's just because, like, Psyche was her little girl, like, was like a...
I think that part of it was that she felt so bad about herself. Like, she calls herself ugly multiple times in the section, and she actually finds that Psyche is really beautiful. And so there was that kind of, I don't want to say not necessarily like living vicariously through her, but kind of part of that, just the feel that like she's so adored, and she can say that was part of like raising Psyche and making her good-hearted and beautiful in a way. And so I feel like raising Psyche, who is so beautiful, kind of helps Oral feel beautiful in herself. But then her other character motivations of like what she does and why she talks back to the king and stuff, that's really all centered around how she feels about Psyche and trying to protect her and everything.
I think because no one else will want to take care of Psyche, I think she feels the responsibility to take care of her because no one else will.
Yeah. And I think there's definitely a contrast between the two sisters of the king, the first
Yeah.
two, Redival and Oral, that Redival really spites Psyche because of her beauty, but Oral is more welcoming in her and more loving toward her because she's beautiful.
I guess analyze a description or the words said by another character, the character's own words that make us feel this way. I feel like that's something we could talk about with Oral and how she said herself that she thinks she's ugly, and the king also like makes fun of Oral for how she looks. I think that's something that's definitely important and goes towards her motivation, is that she's never been told she was beautiful, and it talked about how when they cut off all of their hair to mourn their mom's death, all the slaves were sad that Redival was going to lose her hair because it was so beautiful, and no one cared that Oral had lost her hair. Some other conflicts in the narrative.
The biggest conflict now is Psyche getting tied to a tree.
So, does it arise from context, the characters, or both? I feel like it's kind of both.
The high priest definitely wants to kill Psyche
Yeah.
and sacrifice her.
And part of it was Redival's fault because
Mhm.
Redival went to the high priest, so that's definitely
Yeah.
the character's aspect.
And context-wise, it's just like a bunch of plagues are happening, and they're blaming it on Ungit's anger, and says that, Ungit will destroy the whole town, city, whatever it is, if she doesn't get something to quiet her, which the high priest suggests, like, oh, this beautiful woman that's making her angry. So it's character of Ungit, also the context, because Ungit is making the plagues and everything, and then
If you want to look at it in a little bit different of a way, if you don't look at it like Ungit is actually doing it, and it's just a series of bad luck. And so either way you look at it, it's causing the people to think they need to sacrifice Psyche. So what do you guys think about the point of view? Because it's a first-person book, and it's from...
Oral's point of view.
Yes.
Mhm.
How do you think that affects the story?
well, I mean, we won't really know what's going to happen to Psyche, because my guess is that she's not going to follow her to be tied to the tree, and so since it's first person, you're not going to know what goes on, what happens with the sacrifice, and so that can kind of add suspense in a way. And also because of that, she could not be the most reliable of narrators, because what she's going to know from what happened on the mountain is only going to come from word of mouth, which, if you've ever played the game Telephone before, is not the most reliable, because people can change what they say. So I really truly believe that she's trying to be a reliable narrator, because at the beginning she's saying, I'm going to be completely honest, it's going to make the gods angry, but I need to write this down. So because she's risking a lot to write it down and to tell her story, no one would make stuff up if it's really going to mean that the gods are going to come and kill me.
In fact, I think at one point she even says, I'm being completely honest here and I can't leave out my own faults, and she writes down like that one of her faults is that she was jealous of Psyche. So along with that line, like that she is trying to be reliable, but doesn't have all of the information, because it's kind of impossible for someone to have all of the information.
I think context-wise is where she's going to be an unreliable narrator, just because of plot points and different characters that she's not going to be around at times, that she's going to want to tell the story of their point of view.
I like when books are written in first person, because I feel like I can actually experience the way a character is actually experiencing it. So I did like how it lended to the story that way, in that you were actually like in the story, you were experiencing it, you were there with Psyche as they were like crying and talking about what's going to happen, and hearing the 3 knocks on the door, which meant that it was time for Oral to leave Psyche and getting closer to Psyche being sacrificed. Like, I felt like that really helped there, affecting emotionally how I was attached to the characters.
I think being in first person too makes you more attached to the narrator herself, because as much as with the scenes we know her emotions, we don't really know what other characters' emotions are. Like, we can guess because of like the way that she describes them and stuff like that. With the ending scene where she is visiting Psyche before they do take her to the Grey Mountain, we are, at least when I read it, I was led to believe that Psyche was really calm about the whole entire thing. But it could be something, because it's first person point of view and because it's told from Oral's perspective, that Psyche may be just concealing her fear. And that's something that we don't really know from a first person perspective. I think being in first person, we're definitely very in touch with Oral's feelings and Oral's thought process and stuff like that, which is probably going to be important later on. But right now, when we're introduced to so many characters, we don't really see it from their point of view.
I found a paragraph on the setting, specifically the Grey Mountain, that they talk about, which is where Psyche will be tied up if she gets sacrificed to Ungit. And I can read the paragraph real quick, and then we can do rhetorical analysis. The fox was so trusted by now that when my father did not need him, he was allowed to take us anywhere, even miles from the palace. We were often out all day in the summer on the hilltop to the southwest, looking down on Gloam and across to the Grey Mountain. We stared our eyes out on that jagged ridge till we knew every tooth and notch of it, for none of us had ever gone there or seen what was on the other side. Psyche, almost from the beginning, for she was a very quick, thinking child, was half in love with the mountain. She made herself stories about it. When I'm big, she said, I will be a great, great queen, married to the greatest king of all, and he will build me a castle of gold and amber up there on the very top. So, I guess we can start with, the intention, obviously, is to describe the mountain, and it's kind of setting up how important the mountain is going to be. It's the first introduction to the mountain.
It's also some foreshadowing from Psyche's perspective, because she said from when she was very little, I want my husband to build me a castle on the Grey Mountain. And then guess what? She's going to be taken to the Grey Mountain and probably married to the monster there, so she's going to get what she wanted. But at this point in time, when we were reading this section, we didn't know that was going to happen, so it's just serving as foreshadowing at the moment.
It also serves later to connect, because they talk about her going to the Grey Mountain, and then later on they actually bring back up the house made of gold and amber. In the last scene, when Oral is talking to Psyche, they bring back up the gold and amber house, and it serves to calm Psyche down that she's actually going to the place that she wanted to go to when she was younger.
Mm-hmm. And this is all taking place like when they're like having fun, hanging out, running around on this mountain. So it's seen as a very homey and playful place that's like calm, where she can be at peace. I think that helps her accept the fact that she's going to be sacrificed there, knowing that she has happy memories there.
I think the tone changes within that paragraph alone that you just read, that from Oral's description, she uses teeth to describe it, which could be metaphorically symbolized of the monster that lives there, so intentional word choice that they picked there. And then also when it switches to what Psyche was saying about it, it is, like you said, it's lighthearted, it's fun, and so that's also like a perspective change, and that can give us a little bit more insight into Psyche's character herself.
So it has some ethos in that, like, you're hearing two perspectives on the mountain. So you hear what Psyche thinks of the mountain, how she always wants to go there, but you also hear what Oral thinks of the mountain and how it is more jagged and, I don't want to say not as beautiful, but it's not as lighthearted to her. So you can hear both sides, and I think that always adds authority. You trust the information more when you hear it from two people.
And I think the first person, like telling that paragraph in the first person by Oral adds more ethos to it, as well as some logos, because, I mean, it's logical how a landscape is going to look, and she has the ethos telling us how it's going to look, because it's from her point of view, whereas if it was from, like, Psyche's point of view,
It might not be.
they might not be as, like,
accurate.
Yeah, accurate and vivid, and
Mhm.
so.
But then the fact that it was in quotes, recalling what Psyche had said about it makes it a little bit more reliable because it's actually words that she had said, so that's her opinions, her voicing her opinion. And I think the pathos really comes from the description alone. They had some interactions and with Psyche talking about the mountain, and that had some of her emotion, how she felt about it, but I think the description alone, showing how Oral felt about the mountain, that it was jagged, shows you how kind of daunting this whole situation is, building up to it, that this is this scary mountain that this girl is going to be taken to and sacrificed at. And so the idea of a sacrifice alone is frightening, but the fact that she's going to be left alone up in that mountain, at least from Oral's perspective, is really scary. But from what we heard from Psyche, that she wants to go visit that mountain, she wants to be in that mountain.
And they say that none of them have ever been to the mountain, so looking at the story in the future, it adds a sense of mystery to it. So it plays a part in affecting the story. The readers don't know what's on the mountain either, so we don't know what's going to happen when Psyche does end up on the mountain, and we don't know what's going to happen.